The millionaire invites his ex-girlfriend to his wedding, hoping to see her suffer. But the ex shows up with her triplets, each claiming to be his daughter. The event that was meant to be the highlight of his life turns into an emotional battlefield. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Stay tuned. Blake Ashford stood at the window of his penthouse, savoring the panoramic view of the park, as the golden hour transformed the city into a glittering dreamscape. At 42, he had everything a man could desire: a tech empire valued at billions, fair social circle that included politicians and celebrities, and now a wedding that would cement his status among New York's elite. 2 hours until the rehearsal dinner, darling, called Vanessa Hamilton, his fiancée, as she emerged from the master bedroom. Her honey blonde hair cascaded over bare shoulders, her designer dress hugging every curve of her socialite figure. The daughter of a banking dynasty, Vanessa was the perfect addition to Blake's carefully curated life. "Everything will be perfect," Blake replied, straightening his custom Tom Ford tie. The word perfect had become his mantra, the standard to which he held his life. Perfection was control, and control had made him rich. Vanessa approached and kissed his cheek. "The Times is sending a photographer to the ceremony tomorrow. Daddy pulled some strings." She smiled, revealing teeth whitened to perfection, "and Page 6 wants an exclusive on the reception." Blake nodded approvingly. In their world, publicity was currency, and their wedding was poised to be the social event of the season. 500 guests at the Plaza Hotel, a celebrity chef, and a private performance by a Grammy-winning artist whose name was contractually embargoed until the big day. His phone vibrated with a message from his assistant. The guest list was finalized, including one name that made Blake's heart skip: Olivia Mitchell. He had personally added her name 3 weeks ago, after a midnight Scotch session had awakened old memories. Olivia, his college girlfriend, his first love, the woman who'd walked away 13 years ago when his ambition began to eclipse their relationship, the woman who still occasionally haunted his dreams, despite his protestations that he had moved on. "Is everything all right?" Vanessa asked, noticing the change in his expression. "Just business," Blake lied smoothly, pocketing his phone. He'd told Vanessa nothing about Olivia, presenting the invitation as merely a courtesy to an old friend. In truth, he wanted Olivia, to see what she had missed: his success, his beautiful bride, his perfect life. As their limousine glided through toward the restaurant where the rehearsal dinner would be held, Blake scrolled through emails on his tablet, only half listening to Vanessa's chatter about the seating arrangements. His mind wandered to Olivia. Would she come alone? Was she still the passionate, principled woman who had challenged him at every turn? Had life been kind to her? The restaurant had been closed to the public for the event. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with white orchids. Vanessa's parents, Richard and Eleanor Hamilton, greeted them at the entrance, champagne flutes already in hand. "There's our power couple," Richard boomed, pulling Blake into a firm handshake. "The markets are buzzing about tomorrow. Ashford." Tech stock jumped 3 points just on wedding anticipation. Blake chuckled, though he had indeed been tracking the market reaction. "Let's hope our vows have the same effect." Eleanor embraced Vanessa, her diamonds catching the light. "You look divine, sweetheart. That Vera Wang was worth every penny." Guests began to arrive: tech moguls, Wall Street titans, politicians, seeking proximity to wealth. Blake played his role flawlessly, discussing market trends and golf handicaps, complimenting wives on their jewelry and husbands on their recent acquisitions. Vanessa circulated through the room like royalty, her laughter melodious and measured. It was during the third course when Blake saw her. Olivia stood at the entrance, her dark hair shorter than he remembered, her green eyes scanning the room with the same intelligence that had captivated him in college. She wore a simple midnight blue dress that somehow made the designer gowns around her look overdone. Time had been kind to her, adding character to her beauty rather than diminishing it. But she wasn't alone. 3 identical girls flanked her, each with dark hair and eyes that seemed hauntingly familiar. They appeared to be around 12 years old, dressed in complementary but not identical dresses, their expressions a mix of nervousness and curiosity. Blake froze, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. A cold realization crept up his spine. Those girls, with their heart-shaped faces, those eyes, they looked like his younger sister had at that age. They looked like him. Vanessa followed his gaze. "Oh, is that your friend? The one from Colombia? I didn't realize she was bringing children." Blake couldn't speak. The room seemed to tilt slightly. 13 years since Olivia had walked away. 12 years since she had stopped taking his calls. The math was not subtle. Olivia spotted him, and her expression shifted from apprehension to resolve. She leaned down to speak to the girls, then made her way toward him, the three lookalikes following in her wake. Conversations hushed as heads turned to watch their approach. "Hello, Blake," Olivia said, her voice steady. "Thank you for the invitation. It was unexpected." Blake found his voice. "Olivia, I'm glad you could make it." He gestured toward Vanessa. "This is my fiancée, Vanessa Hamilton. Vanessa, this is Olivia Mitchell, an old friend from college." Vanessa extended a manicured hand, her social training overriding the awkwardness of the moment. "Pleasure to meet you. And who are these lovely young ladies?" Olivia placed her hands on the shoulders of the girls, who stood straight as soldiers facing inspection. "These are my daughters, Sophia, Emma, and Zoe." Blake searched their faces, seeing echoes of his own features, his mother's nose, his father's chin. The triplets stared back at him with varying expressions, curiosity, wariness, and what seemed like defiance. "How fascinating," Vanessa said, filling the silence. "Triplets must be quite the adventure. Are you enjoying the city, girls?" "It's our first time in New York," said one of the girls. Emma, Blake thought. "Mom said we should see where our father lives." The silence that followed was deafening. Nearby, conversations faltered as guests pretended not to eavesdrop. Blake felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "Perhaps we should speak privately," Olivia suggested, her calm demeanor belying the bombshell her daughter had just dropped. "I don't think that's necessary," Blake said too quickly. "This is hardly the venue for whatever this is." "On the contrary," Olivia replied, "I think it's exactly the right venue. After all, you invited me to witness your happiness. I thought you might want to know about theirs." Vanessa's champagne. Glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. The crash seemed to underscore the fracturing of Blake's perfect world. "Girls," Olivia continued, "this is Blake Ashford, your biological father." Blake's vision narrowed, the edges of the room going dark. He was vaguely aware of gasps from nearby guests, of Vanessa's hand dropping from his arm, of Richard Hamilton's face reddening with anger or embarrassment. One of the girls, Sophia, the one with the curious expression, took a step toward him. "You look like our grandfather in the pictures Mom keeps." Blake began, but words failed him. For a man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals, he found himself utterly unprepared for this moment. "Perhaps," said Eleanor Hamilton, suddenly appearing at Vanessa's side, "we should all take a moment to collect ourselves. This is a delicate matter that deserves discretion." "I agree," Olivia said, "but Blake should know that we're staying at the Ritz-Carlton, room 1214. When you're ready to talk, really talk about your daughters, that's where we'll be." With that, she guided the girls away, leaving Blake to face the wreckage of his rehearsal dinner. Camera phones had appeared, discreetly capturing the moment. By morning, he knew this would be trending on social media, dissected in gossip columns, perhaps even picked up by mainstream news. Vanessa's eyes met his, filled with questions he couldn't answer and accusations he couldn't deny. The perfect facade of Blake Ashford's life had just begun to crumble, revealing the hollow core beneath. The Plaza Hotel suite felt like a prison cell, despite its opulence. Blake paced the length of the sitting room, his Italian leather shoes sinking into plush carpet, as Vanessa sat rigid on the edge of an antique settee, her engagement ring catching the light with each nervous twist of her fingers. 12 years. Blake, 12 years you've had daughters and never once mentioned them, Her voice was controlled, but the tremor underneath betrayed her fury. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "I didn't know," Blake insisted, loosening his tie, which suddenly felt like a noose. "Vanessa, you have to believe me. Olivia never told me she was pregnant." "And you expect me to believe that?" Vanessa stood, her designer dress rustling. A man who runs background checks on his housekeepers somehow missed the fact that his ex-girlfriend had triplets. Blake ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, disturbing its careful arrangement. "We broke up. She moved to Seattle. I called for months, but eventually I stopped. I was building the company focused on the future." "Your future," Vanessa corrected, "not theirs." She moved to the window, gazing out at the park, its trees appearing small from their 30-story vantage point. "Why did you invite her, Blake? And don't tell me it was an innocent reunion." The question hung in the air. Blake couldn't admit that he'd wanted to flaunt his success, to show Olivia what she'd missed by choosing principles over pragmatism, passion over ambition. Such an admission would only confirm what Vanessa was beginning to suspect, that their relationship had always been more about image than love. "I thought I'd made peace with the past," he said instead. Vanessa's laugh was brittle. "The past doesn't make peace, Blake. It waits." His phone vibrated incessantly, calls from his publicist, texts from board members who'd attended the rehearsal dinner, notifications from news alerts where his name was beginning to appear. The story was breaking. "We need to get ahead of, this," he said, reaching for his phone. "I'll call Diane. She can draft a statement, something about welcoming unexpected joy into our lives." "Our lives?" Vanessa turned, her face flushed. "These aren't our children, Blake. They're yours and hers." She pointed toward the door. "There's a reason she brought them tonight. She wants something." What could she possibly want? "Money? I'll give her money." "Not everyone's motives are transactional," Vanessa replied. "Maybe she wants her daughters to know their father. Maybe she wants them to have a relationship with you." The idea terrified Blake more than any financial demand could have. Relationships required time, emotional investment, vulnerability, all things he'd carefully excised from his life in pursuit of success. Children weren't a line item that could be budgeted for or delegated to an assistant. "I'll meet with her," he finally said. "Find out what she wants." "What they want," Vanessa corrected. "There are 4 people involved, not just Olivia." A knock at the suite door interrupted them. Blake's personal assistant, Marcus, entered with the cautious expression of someone delivering bad news to a volatile boss. "Sir, there's been a significant social media response to the incident. Several news outlets are requesting comments, and TMZ has already posted a video." Blake swore under his breath. "How bad?" Marcus handed him a tablet. On the screen, a shaky cell phone video showed Olivia's dramatic revelation, followed by Vanessa's dropped champagne glass and Blake's stunned expression. The post already had thousands of shares. "Mr. Hamilton has called twice," Marcus added, referring to Vanessa's father. "He suggested postponing tomorrow's ceremony until this can be handled appropriately." Vanessa's expression hardened. Of course he did. Heaven forbid a Hamilton be associated with scandal. She moved to the bedroom, pausing at the doorway. "I'm going to my parents' apartment. I need to think, Blake. Away from you and your crisis management team." After she left, Blake sat heavily on the sofa, staring at the tablet screen where his public humiliation played on loop. The perfect Blake Ashford, billionaire tech innovator, philanthropist, his most eligible bachelor until his engagement, reduced to a deer in headlights by 3 12-year-old girls. His phone rang again. This time it was Peter Chen, his company's lead counsel. "I've seen the video," Peter said without preamble. "We need to verify paternity before you make any public acknowledgements. If these girls are yours, there are financial implications that need to be addressed with proper legal protection." "They're mine," Blake said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "You didn't see them, Peter. They have my mother's eyes." "Regardless, we should proceed with caution. I can have a team at your suite within the hour to discuss strategy." Blake ended the call, suddenly exhausted by the thought of treating his newly discovered daughters as a legal problem to be solved. He needed clarity, not more advisors. He texted Marcus to bring his car around, then called the Ritz-Carlton to confirm that Olivia Mitchell was indeed registered in room 1214. 20 minutes later, he was in the elevator of the luxury hotel, his heart hammering against his ribs. When Olivia opened the door, she looked unsurprised to see him. She wore jeans and a simple blouse now, her evening makeup washed away, and somehow she looked more like the woman he had known in college, authentic in a way that made him acutely aware of his own careful curation. "I figured you'd come tonight," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. "The girls are in the adjoining room watching a movie. I thought we should talk first." The suite was smaller than his at the plaza, but still luxurious, with views of the city lights twinkling against the night sky. On the coffee table lay 3 identical backpacks in different colors and a stack of what appeared to be schoolwork. "Why now, Olivia?" Blake asked, remaining standing while she sat in an armchair. "After 12 years of silence, why bring them to my wedding? Rehearsal? Would you have preferred I wait until after the ceremony?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I received your invitation 3 weeks ago. It seemed like you were finally ready to acknowledge the past." "I invited you because—" Blake stopped, unable to voice his petty motivation. "Because you wanted to show me what I'd missed?" Olivia finished for him. "The billionaire lifestyle, the trophy wife, I figured as much." Her perception stung because it was accurate. "You could have called," he said defensively. "I did call, Blake, for months after I found out I was pregnant. Your assistant said you were too busy building your empire to speak with me." She leaned forward. "After the 10th call, I got the message. You'd moved on, so I did too. I raised our daughters without expecting anything from you." "Then why are you here now?" Olivia sighed, a sound heavy with years of single parenthood. "Sophia has a medical condition. It's genetic from your side of the family. The doctors need a complete family medical history." Blake felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath him. "What condition?" "A rare form of juvenile arthritis. It's manageable with proper treatment, but we need to know if there are other conditions in your family line that might complicate things." Blake thought of his father, who had battled rheumatoid arthritis in his final years, and his paternal grandmother, who had been in a wheelchair by 60. "My father had arthritis," he said quietly. "It was severe." Olivia nodded, taking notes on her phone. "That helps. There's more, though. The girls are getting older. They're asking questions about you that I can't answer. They deserve to know where they come from, Blake. Half of their identity is a mystery to them. And you thought humiliating me at my rehearsal dinner was the way to introduce me into their lives." "No," Olivia admitted. "That wasn't the plan. I was going to approach you privately after the dinner, but when Emma realized who you were, she's been researching you online for months, she couldn't contain herself. I'm sorry for how it happened, but I'm not sorry they finally met you." From the adjoining room came sounds of laughter, then a brief argument over what movie to watch next. The normalcy of it struck Blake as surreal. 3 girls who shared his DNA, living regular lives completely separate from his, forming personalities and preferences he knew nothing about. "What do they know about me?" he asked. "That you were my college boyfriend, that you're their biological father, that you've been busy building a company." Olivia's tone was neutral, betraying neither bitterness nor admiration. "I never painted you as a villain, Blake. I just told them the truth, that sometimes people's paths diverge. And now our paths are converging again," Blake said, pacing to the window. "What exactly do you want from me? Money for medical treatments? A relationship with the girls? Both?" "I don't need your money. I've done well enough as an environmental attorney. Seattle real estate may not be a waste, but we have a good life." She stood, joining him at the window. "What I want is for you to give the girls a chance. Get to know them, let them know you. They're extraordinary people, Blake. Each one so different, yet undeniably connected." "And my wedding? My fiancé? My company? How am I supposed to integrate 3 preteens into that life overnight?" "That's for you to figure out," Olivia said, her voice softening. "But I can tell you this, those girls are the best thing that ever happened to me. They might be for you too if you let them." A door opened, and one of the triplets, Blake wasn't sure which, stood in the doorway of the adjoining room. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore glasses that magnified eyes identical to his own. "Mom?" she said. "Zoe and Emma are fighting over the remote again." Olivia smiled. "I'll be right there, Sophia." She turned to Blake. "Would you like to meet them? Properly this time?" Blake hesitated, his mind racing through the implications. His wedding was in less than 24 hours. Vanessa was possibly reconsidering their entire relationship. His company's stock might tank when news outlets ran with the story of his secret family. His carefully constructed world was on the verge of collapse. Yet something about Sophia's curious gaze pulled at him. She was his daughter. He had 3 daughters. The reality of it began to sink in, displacing the shock and defensive anger that had carried him through the evening. "Yes," he said finally, "I would." As he followed Olivia toward the adjoining room, Blake felt a strange mixture of terror and anticipation. He was stepping into uncharted territory, a world where spreadsheets and strategic planning offered no advantage, where his wealth and status meant nothing compared to the judgment of 3 12-year-old girls who shared his blood but knew nothing of him. The hotel suite's adjoining room had been transformed into a battlefield of adolescent personalities. Emma, the bold one who had spoken up at the rehearsal dinner, was stretched across the king-sized bed, remote, clutched possessively to her chest. Zoe perched cross-legged on a chair, glowering at her sister with the particular intensity only identical siblings can muster. Sophia, who had alerted Olivia to the conflict, hovered uncertainly by the door as Blake and her mother entered. All 3 girls froze when they saw Blake. Despite being genetically identical, their expressions couldn't have been more different. Emma's challenging, Zoe's suspicious, Sophia's cautiously hopeful. "Girls," Olivia said with the practiced calm of a veteran parent, "Mr. Ashford would like to talk with you." "Blake," he corrected automatically. "Just Blake is fine." The formality of Mr. Ashford made him feel like a stranger, which he was, but somehow that truth stung. Emma sat up, dark hair falling across her shoulders as she assessed him with unnerving directness. "Are you cancelling your wedding because of us?" Blake blinked, caught off guard by the bluntness. We haven't made any decisions yet." "That's not a no," observed Zoe, her voice quieter but equally penetrating. "Your fiancé looked really upset." "Who wouldn't be?" Emma interjected. "Finding out your future husband has secret kids at your rehearsal dinner? That's like straight out of a reality show." "We're not secret kids," Sophia corrected, pushing her glasses up. "He didn't know about us." Blake felt a surge of gratitude toward this thoughtful daughter, who seemed determined to give him the benefit of the doubt. He moved further into the room, taking a seat on the edge of an armchair. "Sophia's right," he confirmed. "Your mother. And I lost touch before she knew she was pregnant with you." "But you would have wanted to know, right?" Sophia asked, a hint of vulnerability in her question. "If you had known, you would have been part of our lives." It was the first direct question about his character, and Blake felt the weight of it. 12 years ago, consumed with building his company, would he have embraced fatherhood? The honest answer was probably not. But looking at these 3 girls now, his daughters, he couldn't bring himself to confirm their worst fears. "I would have wanted to know," he said carefully. "And I'm glad I know now." Emma's eyes narrowed, clearly detecting the non-answer. "But you're still getting married tomorrow, right? To the blonde lady who dropped her champagne?" "Emma," Olivia warned, "that's between Blake and Vanessa." "But it affects us," Emma persisted. "If he marries her, does that make her our stepmom? Do we have to call her Mother Vanessa like in those old movies?" Despite the tension, Blake found himself suppressing a smile. Emma had clearly inherited his irreverent sense of humor. "Let's take things one step at a time," he suggested. "Right now, I'd like to learn more about you 3. Your mother tells me you're quite extraordinary." Zoe snorted softly. "Mom has to say that. She's biologically programmed to think we're amazing." "And you're biologically programmed to be amazing," Olivia countered with a practiced ease that made Blake realize how much he'd missed. Years of inside jokes, shared references, the unique language that develops between parent and child. Sophia likes science and books, Emma volunteered. I'm into drama and volleyball. Zoe does art and is like weirdly good at math. We're not as identical as we look, Sophia added, moving closer to sit on the arm of the sofa near Blake. Genetically, yes, but not in here. She tapped her temple. Blake studied their faces, recognizing fragments of himself in each expression. Your mother mentioned that you have a medical condition, Sophia. Something genetic. Sophia nodded, suddenly solemn. Juvenile idiopathic arthritis. It's when your immune system attacks your joints by mistake. Some days are worse than others. Does it hurt? Blake asked, surprised by the protective instinct that surged through him. Sometimes, she admitted, but I have medication, and physical therapy helps. Mom says I'm tougher than I look. She is, Zoe confirmed, her aloof facade cracking slightly. She never complains, even when her hands are so swollen she can't hold a pencil. Blake glanced at Olivia, who watched the exchange with a carefully neutral expression. And the doctors think more information about my family history would help? It could guide treatment options, Olivia explained. Autoimmune. Conditions often run in families, and there are new targeted therapies that work better for specific genetic profiles. Blake made a mental note to have his assistant compile a comprehensive family medical history first thing in the morning. It was a concrete task, something tangible he could offer. I'll get you everything the doctors need, he promised, and I have connections at Mount Sinai Hospital. They have one of the best pediatric rheumatology departments in the country. We're not staying in New York, Emma said, a hint of challenge in her voice. We have school in Seattle, and Mum's job and our friends and Grandma Joyce. The simple statement underscored the gulf between Blake's world and theirs. In his mind, problems were solved with money and influence. Moving specialists across the country was a matter of making the right offer. But these girls had lives that couldn't be rearranged to suit his convenience. Of course, he said, but perhaps for consultations or if there's a treatment that's only available here. We manage fine in Seattle, Zoe said, her tone protective. Mom makes sure we have good doctors. Blake nodded, accepting the gentle rebuff. I'm sure she does. Your mother always was exceptionally competent. He glanced at Olivia, remembering how she'd organized study groups in college, how she'd balanced classes with environmental activism, how she'd made plans for their future that he'd ultimately rejected in favor of his ambition. She is, Sophia agreed with quiet pride. She's the best environmental lawyer in Washington state. She just won a big case against a company that was polluting the Puget Sound. Blake felt a twinge of something like guilt. While he'd been building a tech empire that made him billions, Olivia had been fighting corporate polluters and raising their daughters. The contrast between their paths was stark. That sounds like her, he said. She always did stand up for what she believed in. A brief silence fell over the room, heavy with the weight of shared genetics and divergent histories. Blake struggled to find the right words, something that rarely happened to him in boardrooms or press conferences. So what happens now? Emma finally asked, addressing the elephant in the room. Are you going to do a DNA test or something? Make sure we're really yours. Emma, Olivia exclaimed. It's a fair question, Blake said, holding up a hand. And no, I don't need a DNA test. I can see myself in each of you. He looked at each girl in turn. But I do need to figure out how to be part of your lives, if that's what you want. What about what you want? Zoe asked shrewdly. Yesterday? You didn't even know we existed. Now you're supposed to be our dad. Do you even want kids? The question cut to the heart of Blake's dilemma. He and Vanessa had discussed children in the abstract, perhaps one or two perfectly timed additions to their dynastic union. But the reality of instant fatherhood to 3 nearly teenage girls was something else entirely. I think, he said, slowly, that I'm still processing what happened tonight, but I do know that now that I've met you, I can't imagine going back to not knowing you exist. It wasn't quite an answer, but it was the most honest thing he could offer at the moment. Sophia seemed to accept it, her expression softening. Zoe remained skeptical, while Emma studied him with the intensity of a jury foreperson deliberating a verdict. Your wedding is tomorrow, Sophia pointed out gently. You should probably figure things out with your fiancé first." The simple wisdom from his 12-year-old daughter struck Blake forcefully. While his PR team was no doubt crafting statements and his lawyers were reviewing potential custody arrangements, the most important conversation awaiting him was with Vanessa. "You're right," he acknowledged. "I should talk to her." "And if she doesn't want us in your life?" Emma pressed, voicing the fear that perhaps all three girls shared. Blake hesitated, aware that his answer would set the tone for whatever relationship they might build. "Then she and I have very different visions of our future." The words surprised him as they left his mouth, yet he realized they were true. Something fundamental had shifted in the hours since Olivia and the girls had walked into his rehearsal. Dinner, priorities he'd held immutable for decades, were suddenly in flux. "It's getting late," Olivia interjected, glancing at her watch. "And you girls have had enough excitement for one day. Why don't you get ready for bed while Blake and I talk for a few more minutes?" The girls exchanged glances, that silent communication unique to multiples, before reluctantly complying. Each approached Blake differently as they said goodnight, Sophia with a tentative smile, Zoe with a formal nod, and Emma with an unexpected question. "Will we see you again before we go?" "Back to Seattle?" she asked, vulnerability briefly replacing her bravado. "Yes," Blake promised, surprised by his certainty. "Whatever happens with the wedding, I'll see you tomorrow." After the girls retreated to prepare for bed, Blake returned to the suite's main room with Olivia. His phone had dozens of missed calls and messages, but he ignored them all. "They're remarkable," he said quietly. "They are," Olivia agreed. "But they're also vulnerable, Blake. Whatever you decide to do, please don't make promises you won't keep. They've spent 12 years wondering about you. Now that they've met you, going back to being strangers would be devastating." Blake nodded, the weight of responsibility settling over him like a heavy cloak. "I need to talk to Vanessa, figure out where we stand." "And if she can't accept them?" Olivia asked, echoing Emma's earlier question. Blake looked out at the skyline, the empire he'd built visible in the Ashford Tech building that dominated the Midtown skyline. For years he had defined himself by his success, measured his worth in acquisitions and stock prices. Now, unexpectedly, he found himself faced with a different kind of valuation. "Then I'll have a decision to make," he said, reaching for his coat. "But I think I already know the answer." As he left the hotel, Blake realized he had been wrong earlier. He hadn't invited Olivia to his wedding to show her what she'd missed. He'd invited her because, deep down, he'd never stopped wondering what he had missed by choosing ambition over love. Now he knew. 3 extraordinary mirrors reflecting back the person he might have been, the father he still could become. Blake found Vanessa in her parents' Upper East Side penthouse, not in the guest bedroom she normally used when visiting, but in her childhood room. The space had been preserved like a museum exhibit of adolescent privilege, cheerleading trophies, framed photos from debutante balls, and a canopy bed that had probably cost more than some people's cars. She sat at the white vanity table, still in her rehearsal dinner dress, removing diamond earrings worth a small fortune. "Your father's security let me up," Blake said, lingering in the doorway. Vanessa's eyes met his in the mirror. "They weren't supposed to." "I can be persuasive." "Yes," she said, turning to face him. "That's how we ended up here, isn't it? Your persuasiveness, your ability to make everyone see exactly what you want them to see." Blake entered the room, closing the door behind him. Through the windows, the lights of the city created a glittering backdrop to their confrontation. "I didn't know about the girls," he said, opting for directness. "But I've met them now, properly. They're extraordinary." Vanessa's expression softened slightly. "I'm sure they are. That's not the issue, Blake." "Then what is?" "The fact that your first instinct wasn't to tell me the truth. Not about inviting Olivia to our wedding. Not about your history with her." Vanessa stood, her composure impeccable, despite the emotional storm she must be weathering. "You've constructed this perfect facade, and I've been part of it. The ideal corporate wife, the perfect social partner. But it's not real, is it?" Blake wanted to deny it, to claim that their relationship was built on genuine connection rather than mutual convenience, but Vanessa deserved better than more manipulation. "We built something that works," he said carefully. "A partnership. We're good together, Vanessa. You know that. Good together in public, good for business, good for appearances." She walked to the window, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "I've spent my whole life playing a role, Blake. Daddy's perfect. Daughter. The ideal socialite. Your flawless fiancé. I thought marriage would finally make it real." She turned to face him. "But tonight, I realized it would just be another performance." Blake felt a pang of remorse, not because he'd failed to love Vanessa the way she deserved, but because he'd never considered that she might be seeking something beyond their mutual arrangement. "I care about you," he said, meaning it. "But you don't love me." "Not really." It wasn't a question. "When you looked at Olivia tonight, I saw something in your eyes I've never seen when you look at me." "That was shock," Blake protested. "No." Vanessa shook her head. "It was recognition, like a part of you that's been dormant suddenly woke up." Outside, the bedroom door, voices echoed in the hallway. Vanessa's parents returning from damage control meetings with their own circle of influence. The Hamilton dynasty had weathered scandals before, but nothing quite like this. "What did your father say?" Blake asked. Vanessa laughed, a brittle sound. "What do you think? He's already called the wedding planner to discuss postponement options that won't forfeit our deposits. Mother is drafting a list for a smaller, more intimate ceremony once this all blows over. They're in full crisis management mode. And what do you want?" The question hung between them. Vanessa looked surprised, as if no one had bothered to ask her preference. "In the matter." "I want," she began, then stopped, genuinely considering. "I want something real. Someone who sees me, not just what I represent. Someone who would choose me even if I weren't a Hamilton." She studied Blake's face. "Could that person be you, Blake? If we strip away all the advantages, the social connections, the business alliances, the perfect power couple narrative, would you still choose me?" Blake felt cornered by her emotional honesty. In the boardroom, he could navigate complex negotiations with ease, but here, faced with raw human need, he found himself floundering. "I think you're an extraordinary woman," he said, reaching for her hand. "Any man would be lucky to have you as his wife." "That's not an answer." Vanessa gently withdrew her hand. "But it is an answer, isn't it?" Blake's phone vibrated in his pocket. Again. When he glanced at the screen, he saw a message from his publicist marked, "Urgent NYT story going live." "Your empire calls," Vanessa observed with surprising gentleness. "You should go deal with it. I'll have my assistant collect my things from your penthouse in the morning." "Vanessa, wait. We should talk about this more. The wedding is off," she finished for him. "You know it, I know it, our parents know it. The only questions left are what we tell the public and how we untangle our interconnected lives." She touched his cheek briefly, a farewell gesture. "Go meet your daughters, Blake. Figure out how to be their father. That's more important than any of this." As if summoned by her words, Blake's phone lit up with a call from Olivia. He looked at Vanessa questioningly. "Answer it," she encouraged. "Your new life is waiting." Blake stepped into the hallway, accepting the call. "Olivia, is everything okay?" Olivia's voice was tense. "Blake, there's a problem. Sophia's having a flare-up. Her arthritis. It's bad. We're at New York Presbyterian. The girls are frightened, and the doctors are asking about family medical history I don't have." "I'm on my way," Blake said without hesitation. "Text me the details. I'll bring my family's medical records." When he returned to Vanessa's room, to explain, she was already removing her engagement ring. "I heard," she said. "Go. This is what being a father looks like, showing up when your child needs you." Blake hesitated, struck by the strange role reversal. For years he had been the one setting the terms of their relationship, the one whose priorities dictated their shared schedule. Now Vanessa was dismissing him, freeing him to pursue a connection far more primal than their carefully negotiated alliance. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. "You deserve better." "Yes," she agreed with the hint of a smile. I do, and maybe now I'll find it. She slipped the enormous diamond ring into his hand. Give my regards to Olivia. I think I might have liked her under different circumstances. Blake left the Hamilton penthouse with a strange sense of lightness, despite the medical emergency awaiting him. The countdown clock to his wedding had stopped. The performance had been cancelled. For the first time in years, he was facing a future he hadn't meticulously planned. His driver was waiting with the car. The hospital, sir? Yes, Blake confirmed. And call Marcus. Tell him to bring my father's medical files to New York Presbyterian. All of them. As the car navigated through late-night traffic, Blake's phone exploded with notifications. His publicist had released a statement postponing the wedding due to a family health emergency, which was technically true. The stock market in Asia, where trading was already open, showed Ashford tech shares dropping in response to the uncertainty. His executive team was demanding an emergency call to discuss strategy. None of it seemed to matter as much as it should. Havninwand at the hospital, Blake found Olivia in the pediatric ward, her face drawn with worry. Emma and Zoe sat nearby, identical in their fear, holding hands in a rare display of solidarity. Where is she? Blake asked. In with the specialist, Olivia said. They're doing some tests. Her joints are severely inflamed. Hands, knees, ankles. The pain woke her up crying, and that never happens. Sophia never complains. Blake felt a visceral protectiveness surge through him. I brought my father's medical records. Everything about his arthritis progression, treatments, complications. Olivia looked relieved. That will help. Thank you for coming so quickly. Of course I came. The response was automatic, instinctual. She's my daughter. Emma and Zoe approached cautiously, their earlier bravado subdued by concern for their sister. Is Sophia going to be okay? Emma asked, her voice small. The doctors here are the best in the world, Blake assured her, surprised by his own certainty. And I've already called in specialists from the hospital for special surgery. They'll be here within the hour. Olivia raised an eyebrow. You did? I made some calls in the car, Blake explained. When you have enough money, doctors make house calls, even at midnight. Under normal circumstances, such a display of wealth and influence might have seemed ostentatious. Tonight, it was simply a father deploying every resource at his disposal to protect his child. A doctor emerged from Sophia's room, clipboard in hand. Ms. Mitchell, we have the preliminary results. This is Blake Ashford, Olivia introduced, Sophia's father. He's brought the family medical history we discussed. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, nodded. Mr. Ashford, I understand you had a father with rheumatoid arthritis. Yes, it was particularly aggressive. He was diagnosed in his 40s and was wheelchair-bound by 60. That's helpful information. Sophia has a severe case of juvenile idiopathic arthritis, but with the right treatment plan, we can manage it effectively. The genetic connection to your father's condition gives us a clearer picture of what we're dealing with. Whatever she needs, Blake said firmly, cost is not an issue. The doctor allowed a small smile. I gathered that when 3 world-renowned rheumatologists called me within 5 minutes of each other, all saying you'd requested their presence. Can we see her? Zoe asked. She's resting now, but yes, you can go in. Just try not to wake. Her? The pain medication has finally kicked in. Inside the hospital room, Sophia looked smaller than Blake remembered, her slender frame dwarfed by the hospital bed. Her hands, resting on the blanket, were visibly swollen, the fingers curved, slightly inward. An IV dripped anti-inflammatory medication into her veins. Emma and Zoe immediately went to opposite sides of the bed, each claiming a territory near their sister. Olivia stood at the foot of the bed, the worry of 13 years of solo parenting etched on her face. Blake hung back, uncertain of his place in this intimate family configuration. He was the biological father of the girl in the bed, but he was also a stranger who had, until today, been oblivious to her existence. What right did he have to stand beside her now? As if sensing his hesitation, Sophia's eyes fluttered open. She blinked groggily, gaze moving from her mother to her sisters before landing on Blake. "You came," she whispered, surprise and something like hope in her voice. "Of course," Blake said again, moving to the bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Floaty," Sophia admitted with a small smile. "They gave me the good drugs." Despite the tension, Olivia laughed softly. "That's my Sophia, making jokes even from a hospital bed." "The doctors say you're going to be fine," Blake told her, carefully avoiding the swollen hands. "I've brought in some specialists who know exactly how to treat this. We're going to make a plan to keep you comfortable and active." "Are you still getting married tomorrow?" Sophia asked, the medication making her unusually direct. Blake glanced at Olivia, then back at Sophia. "No, the wedding is off." "Because of us?" Sophia's eyes widened with concern. "Because sometimes people realize they're on different paths," Blake said, echoing Olivia's explanation of their own relationship's end. "Vanessa and I want different things." "Like kids?" Emma interjected. Ever the forthright one, Blake considered this. "Yes, like kids, and specifically like you three." A silence fell over the room as the implications of his statement sank in. He was choosing them, these three girls he had just met, over the carefully constructed future he had planned. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like stepping into a truth he hadn't known he was seeking. "What happens now?" Zoe asked, the practical one. "We still live in Seattle. You live here. You have a company to run." "Now," Blake said, "we figure it out. Together." Outside the Chiu hospital room, the world was spinning into chaos. News outlets were reporting on the cancelled wedding and the surprise appearance of Blake Ashford's secret triplet daughters. Social media was ablaze with speculation. His board of directors was demanding explanations. His carefully constructed image was in tatters. Yet here in this quiet hospital room with these four people who shared his DNA, Blake felt an unexpected clarity. The price of truth was high. His perfect facade had crumbled, taking with it the carefully structured world he had built. But as he watched Sophia drift back to sleep, her sisters maintaining their protective vigil, he realized he had gained something far more valuable. He had found his truth. 6 months could change everything. Blake Ashford sat in his Seattle office, a glass-walled space with views of Elliott Bay that he had constructed after relocating his company's West Coast operations. On his desk, amid quarterly reports and acquisition proposals, sat 3 framed school photos, Sophia, Emma, and Zoe, each with the same face but distinctly different expressions. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Girls' Science Fair at 4. Don't forget." Blake smiled, adding it to his calendar. 6 months ago, his schedule had been filled with investor meetings and product launches. Now it included science fairs, physical therapy appointments, and weekly family dinners. The transition hadn't been seamless, nothing worthwhile ever was, but it had been necessary. "Mr. Ashford," his assistant appeared at the door. "The board is assembled for the video conference." Blake nodded, straightening his tie. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." On his computer screen, financial projections displayed Ashford. Tech's latest quarter, the first profitable one since what the media had dubbed the wedding that wasn't. After an initial nosedive, the company's stock had stabilized, then gradually climbed as Blake had demonstrated that fatherhood hadn't diminished his business acumen, merely redirected his priorities. The door to his office opened without a knock, a privilege granted to only one person. Emma burst in, her school backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression animated. "Dad, I got the lead in the school play. I'm going to be Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz." The word "dad" still created a small shock of recognition whenever one of the girls used it. It had started with Sophia, about a month after the hospital incident. Zoe had held out the longest, only recently transitioning from Blake to Dad, and even then, only in certain moments. "That's fantastic." Blake stood, genuinely excited for her. "When's opening night?" "December 12th. Ms. Peterson says I have exceptional dramatic range," Emma reported proudly, mimicking her drama teacher's formal tone. "She's right about that," Blake agreed, remembering Emma's impressive tantrum just last week when he'd limited her screen time. "But what are you doing here? School doesn't let out for another hour." "Half-day teacher conferences." Emma flopped into his visitor's chair, spinning it in circles. "Mom's picking up Sophia from physical therapy, and Zoe's at her art club. I told Mom I'd hang out here until the science fair." Blake nodded, silently appreciating Olivia's flexibility in allowing him this time with Emma. Their co-parenting arrangement had evolved gradually, with increasing trust on both sides. He'd been surprised at how readily Olivia had accepted his desire to be part of the girls' lives, even facilitating his move to Seattle, despite the complex history between them. "I have a board meeting in 5 minutes," he told Emma, "but afterward we could grab ice cream before the science fair. Just don't tell your sisters." Emma's face lit up. "Deal. Can I work on my lines in the conference room while you talk to the boring business people?" "They're not boring," Blake protested, though privately he had to admit that most board discussions paled in comparison to the vibrant energy of his daughters. "But yes, you can use the conference room. Just don't mess with the prototypes on the table." I know. Confidential intellectual property," Emma recited, having heard the phrase enough times. She gathered her backpack. "Good luck with your meeting. Don't let them see your dad jokes. They might sell their stock." After she left, Blake shook his head, marveling at how completely his life had transformed. The board meeting would focus on the company's new direction, more sustainable technology, fewer privacy-invading features, a corporate responsibility initiative that aligned with values he'd rediscovered through Olivia's environmental work and his daughter's uncorrupted view of the world. His computer chimed with an incoming video call. Taking a deep breath, Blake accepted the connection, facing the 12 board members who had weathered the storm of publicity with him. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began. "Before we discuss the quarterly results, I'd like to address our new partnership with the Environmental Defense Fund, which Ms. Mitchell has helped us structure." On the screen, Jennifer Wong, his longest-serving board member, raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Mitchell, as in your co-parent, the environmental attorney?" "Yes," Blake confirmed unapologetically. "Her expertise in corporate environmental compliance is unparalleled. Our partnership will ensure Ashford Tech is leading the industry in sustainable practices, not merely meeting minimum standards." 6 months ago, such a move would have been unthinkable, allowing personal connections to influence business decisions, partnering with the very type of organization his company had once considered adversarial. But perspectives changed when priorities shifted. The meeting proceeded efficiently, with the board eventually approving the environmental initiative, along with the broader corporate restructuring Blake had proposed. When the call ended, he found Emma waiting in the doorway. "Ready for that ice cream?" she asked. "I was thinking mint chocolate chip." "Actually," came Zoe's voice from behind her, "we were thinking Rocky Road." Blake looked up to see Zoe and Sophia joining Emma, their school bags in hand, Olivia standing behind them with an amused expression. "I thought you were at art club," Emma accused Zoe. "It ended early. Mom picked me up." Sophia adjusted her glasses, the latest flare-up of her arthritis having subsided enough that her fingers were almost back to normal. "And I finished PT early because I did all my exercises correctly the first time." Olivia stepped forward, casually elegant in jeans and a blazer. "I hope we're not interrupting anything important. The girls insisted on coming here before the science fair." "Nothing more important than this," Blake assured her. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, after missing Zoe's art exhibition because of an emergency investor call. The disappointment in her eyes had been more painful than any stock market decline. "Ice cream for everyone, then?" he suggested, reaching for his jacket. "Actually," Sophia said, "we wanted to show you something. First." She pulled a folder from her backpack, laying it on Blake's desk with care. "It's my science fair project, well, our project. We all worked on it." Blake opened the folder to find a detailed genetic analysis, complete with family trees, DNA strand, illustrations and medical histories. The title read, "Genetic Inheritance Patterns in Autoimmune Conditions, a Personal Case Study." "You used your own condition for your project?" Blake asked, impressed by the thoroughness of the research. Sophia nodded. With the data from Grandpa Ashford's medical records and the new testing you arranged, I was able to trace the specific genetic markers. Emma helped with the presentation design, and Zoe did all the illustrations. The doctor says it might actually help other kids, Emma added proudly. Sophia's going to present it at a medical conference for teenagers with juvenile arthritis. Blake felt a surge of pride that almost overwhelmed him. This is incredible work. There's more, Zoe said, reaching into her own bag. She withdrew a large sketch pad and handed it to him. I did this for my final art project. The pad contained a series of portraits: Blake, Olivia, the three girls, even Blake's parents from photographs Zoe had studied. Each drawing captured not just physical likeness, but essence. Blake's determined expression softened by newfound vulnerability, Olivia's strength tempered by compassion, each of the girls with their distinctive personalities shining through identical features. Zoe won the school art prize, Olivia said quietly. The theme was family. Blake studied the drawings, particularly struck by his own portrait. Zoe had captured something in his eyes that he hadn't seen in the mirror until recently, a contentment that no amount of wealth had ever provided. These are extraordinary, he told Zoe, who accepted the compliment with a small smile. Her version of Emma's exuberant grin or Sophia's beaming face. My turn, Emma announced, pulling a folded paper from her jacket pocket. I wrote something for English class. Miss Peterson said I should read it at the father-daughter dance next month. She cleared her throat dramatically. It's called Finding My Father. Blake caught Olivia's eye over Emma's head, seeing in her expression the same mix of apprehension and hope he felt. Neither of them had anticipated how deeply their daughters would invest in rebuilding their fragmented family. Emma began to read, her natural theatrical ability giving weight to her words. Some people are born knowing their fathers. Some discover them along the way. I was 12 years old when I learned that my father wasn't just a blank space on a form, but a real person with my eyes and my sister's smile and my other sister's stubborn chin. The essay continued, detailing with surprising insight the journey from anger to curiosity to tentative acceptance. Emma didn't sugarcoat the difficulties, Blake's initial shock, her own resistance, the awkward early visits, but she concluded with a hope that brought moisture to Blake's eyes. Now I have two parents instead of one, two homes instead of one, two lives that have become a single, more complicated, more complete life. When she finished, the office was silent except for Sophia sniffling quietly. That was beautiful. Emma, Blake said, his voice rough with emotion. So, Emma folded the paper carefully. Will you come to the dance? I know it's probably not as exciting as investor meetings or whatever, but I'll be there, Blake promised. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Olivia checked her watch. We should head to the school for setup. The science fair judges start their rounds at 4:30. As they gathered their things, Blake's phone rang with his executive ringtone, the one reserved for genuine emergencies. He glanced at the screen, seeing his CFO's name. 6 months ago, he would have answered immediately. 3 months ago, he might have hesitated but still taken the call. Today, he silenced the phone without a second thought. It can wait, he told Olivia, who had noticed his action with raised eyebrows. Family comes first. Outside, Seattle's perpetual drizzle had given way to a rare autumn sunshine. As they walked to their cars, Blake would follow Olivia's SUV to the school. Sophia fell into step beside him. Are you happy, Dad? She asked, with the directness that characterized her approach to life. With all the changes, I mean. Blake considered the question seriously. His life bore little resemblance to what it had been 6 months ago. He'd relocated across the country, restructured his company, embraced a co-parenting relationship with a woman he'd once loved and then abandoned, and stepped into fatherhood to 3 preteen girls with fully formed personalities and needs. The adjustment had been jarring, the learning curve steep. Happier than I've ever been, he told her truthfully, though I still have a lot to learn. Like how to make decent pancakes, Sophia teased, referring to his disastrous attempt at Sunday breakfast the previous weekend. And how to braid hair properly. I'm working on it, Blake promised. The pancakes, at least. Your hair might be a lost cause. Sophia smiled, the expression transforming her serious face. Mom says you're not the same person you were when you were together in college. She says you've grown. The observation caught Blake off guard. Your mother said that. She says people change, sometimes for the better. Sophia adjusted her glasses. I think she might still like you. You know, as more than just the father of her children. Before Blake could formulate a response to this unexpected insight, Olivia called from the parking lot. Sophia, Emma's trying to convince Zoe that she should dye her hair purple for the play. Coming, Sophia called back. She gave Blake a last meaningful look before hurrying to intervene in what had become a typical sister squabble. Blake followed more slowly, watching as Olivia expertly diffused the situation, sending Emma to the front seat as punishment while Zoe and Sophia took the back. The scene was so normal, so family-like, that Blake felt a pang of something like nostalgia for a life he had never actually lived, until now. He thought about Sophia's comment as he got into his own car. The possibility of reconciliation with Olivia had hovered unspoken between them for months, complicated by their history and their current commitment to co-parenting without additional complications. But lately, something had been shifting in their interactions, lingering glances, conversations that extended beyond discussions of the girls, a rediscovered comfort in each other's presence. As he followed Olivia's car toward the school, Blake reflected on the path that had led him here. The cancelled wedding had made headlines for weeks. Vanessa, to her credit, had handled the situation with grace, even sending a care package for Sophia during her hospital stay. She was now dating a documentary filmmaker who appreciated her for more than her social connections, a fact that gave Blake genuine pleasure. They had both found their way to more authentic lives. His phone rang again, this time Olivia calling through his car's Bluetooth. Emma says to remind you that you promised ice cream after the science fair. Her voice filled the car. Apparently, it was supposed to be a secret, but she can't help herself. Sire busted, Blake laughed. Tell her the offer extends to everyone now. Generous of you, Olivia replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Blake, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. After the girls are in bed, tonight maybe we could talk. There was a note in her voice that made his pulse quicken. Absolutely. I'll bring the ice cream to your place after the fair. Perfect. As they pulled into the school parking lot, Blake saw his daughters piling out of Olivia's car, their energy and enthusiasm undimmed by the prospect of a science fair on a Friday afternoon. They waited for him, 3 identical faces with 3 distinct expressions, alongside the woman who had raised them alone for 12 years. His family. Unexpected, unplanned, yet somehow exactly what he had always needed. Blake Ashford had built an empire of technology, but his greatest achievement stood before him now, not a perfect facade carefully constructed to impress the world, but a messy, complex, genuine connection to the people who shared his blood and increasingly his heart. As he joined them, Sophia slipped her hand into his, a gesture of acceptance that meant more than any business deal he had ever closed. Emma chattered excitedly about her upcoming role while Zoe quietly observed everything with her artist's eye. Olivia caught his gaze over the girls' heads, her smile holding possibilities he had once been too blind to see. Together, they walked into the school, a family in progress, rebuilding what had once been broken into something stronger, more genuine, and infinitely more valuable than anything Blake had left behind. The price of truth had been high. The reward, he now understood, was beyond measure. Dear listeners, we hope you've been captivated by Blake and Olivia's journey of rediscovery and the powerful connection between a father and his daughters. Their story reminds us that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as our greatest challenges. If this tale of family, redemption, and second chances touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Your support helps us continue bringing these emotional journeys to life. For more compelling stories that explore the complexities of human relationships, check out our specially curated playlist by clicking the link to your left. We've collected stories that will move you, challenge you, and perhaps help you see your own relationships in a new light. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear which character